All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back for another Bokeh Podcast episode, brand new guest. And I'm really excited about this one. We were already chatting up a storm before we started recording. Livingston Lee is here with me. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, Livingston.
Yep. Thank you, Nathan, for having me.
And we actually connected, I think the first time we connected, was it at WPPI a few years ago?
Yes. Yep. That was it. Yep.
I think we were walking through the MGM and we got a chance to chat briefly. And so this conversation here on the podcast has been a long time coming. I'm glad that we finally got to make it happen. And you're a photographer, but I have to go ahead and kind of break the fourth wall here and tell our listeners, I've alluded to this on the podcast. I've been learning how to trade in the market, to day trade in the market over the last 9 months or so, kind of around the time that coronavirus kicked in. And I found out that Livingston is also doing the same thing, has been doing the same thing for way longer than I have. And so I got really excited. I was like, oh man, we're going to have some conversation about this. But photographer, how long have you been a photographer now, Livingston?
I've been shooting since about 2014. I would say professionally, that was kind of around the time. That was right around the first wedding that I did that, I charged someone for, was right around 2014.
Okay.
So I would say, maybe about 6 years, somewhere around there, 7 years.
Okay. And you said you started trading about the same time, correct?
Yeah, 2013 is when I started trading.
Okay.
When I first opened my account and saw something different, and I said, I have to do this more. So, since 2013 is around the time I was doing that.
Yeah, there is something, and by the way, for everybody listening in, this is not going to be an episode about day trading in the marketplace, but I had to geek out for a second. You mentioned opening up your account and seeing something there and getting excited. There is something about that first kind of hit that you get, if you will, of a win. In the marketplace, and it could even be a few bucks. I think the first experience that I had that just really grabbed my attention was not knowing anything at all, just being in Robinhood, and I think 3 days in a row, I made $800 within the span of a few minutes. So we're talking like $2,400 within the span of a few days.
Yep.
And it was like, what in the world is this?
Yes.
And so I saw the potential there. Now, the mistake that I made was then getting overly excited, rushing in, and then making kind of all the massive list of kind of stereotypical rookie mistakes in the trading world. And I lost a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm. Probably half of what you made.
I won't divulge numbers, but it wasn't pretty. But that being said, I've learned a lot since, and it's actually been a really good exercise in discipline on multiple levels. I've loved learning the technical side of trading, and I've certainly grown as an individual as a result of having to learn the disciplines associated with trading. And now I'm also developing a skill set that that could easily enable me to double my monthly income. And I'm pretty excited about that, but I just want to kind of throw that out there, kind of whet the appetite of those listening in. And Livingston, maybe we'll end with this and we'll actually get to photography. What would you suggest as kind of like a first resource for our listeners if they're interested at all in whether it's day trading or investing?
I would say get on the Investopedia.
Okay.
That's a good resource for just kind of learning the jargon that we use in the trading world. And, I offer just some free online like Zoom classes that I'm doing just to kind of get your feet wet and show you around. If anyone is interested in that, they can, reach out to me and let me know, and I can get them on one of the calls.
Well, that's really cool. Okay, so of course we're going to link to all your contact info later on. We'll put that in the show notes. And of course, if you're listening in, anybody listening in now, first of all, you can go to Livingston's website, his photography website. We are going to talk about photography. It's just livingstonlee.com, just like it sounds, and then Livingston Lee Photo on Instagram as well. And we'll link to those in the show notes. I want to throw out one resource for our listeners as well. Again, if you're curious about this world and you're interested in maybe studying it over the long run, because it does take some time certainly to get there. But How to Day Trade for a Living by a guy named Andrew Aziz it's a book that I read a little while back, and I really can't recommend it enough. In fact, I wish I'd read that book at the very beginning, because it lends perspective and good introductory perspective to the world of trading. Incredible resource. And I think the Kindle version's all of like $3. So easily accessible. We'll link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com as well. And maybe one of these days, Livingston, we can come back and actually do a show just geared around investing and day trading for those who might be interested.
I would love that, man. I can talk about it all day long.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to, for those who are like, hey, this is a photography podcast, let's talk photography. We're going to do that now. We're going to get to the questions that I would normally ask at the beginning of our podcast episodes. And then we're going to get into a really interesting topic today. We haven't dealt with this topic a whole lot on the show in roughly 500 episodes or so that we've recorded. We're going to talk about file management, but specifically protecting files, backing up files. And Livingston's got a workflow for you that he's going to suggest. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But to start with, Livingston, talk to me about your photography business's brand position. What's the unique value proposition that you offer to your marketplace?
I think the brand position that I offer in my marketplace, and the market here is not as big as one as like a DC or New York or somewhere like that. It is a pretty decent one though, but what I offer is photography and video at a fair price.
Okay.
And I also offer wedding album with each package, so that way you have something tangible to go back on. And I know it's probably some photographers saying no, don't do that, but for it's not a the best album you can get, but it's something to give to, my couples after the wedding for something for them to hold on to, so that's what I offer as a brand position that I know a lot of other photographers in this area that they don't offer that. So, I offer it, and sometimes that's a leg up for me.
For sure. Well, and that's kind of the idea behind a brand position to begin with is, number one, we create differentiation, separation, right? In the sense that there are, especially in 2021, there are so many photographers out there. So how do we create distinction so that we could stand out from the noisy industry and capture the attention of a potential client? Ideally, well, certainly we can do that in a number of ways, but one of the most effective ways, I think, and one that's just not discussed enough in our industry, is a distinct brand position. Now, you have an interesting brand position. You're talking about offering wedding photography services and videography and photography services at a fair price. That's also something that you don't see a lot. Some photographers start their businesses and offer inexpensive package prices, but I don't see many photographers specifically running on that brand position. Believe it or not, I'm actually in the process, kind of slow process because I've got so many things on my plate at the moment, but Livingston, I'm getting ready to relaunch my photography business here in Chattanooga. I shot weddings for about 12 years, but I'm actually going to launch on that very, very similar position. And right now, that brand position statement is very simply affordable wedding photography for Chattanooga couples. And the reason, or one of the reasons that I'm running on that, is because, number one, there's a massive need for it in the marketplace. Like, no matter how much, us, and I say egotistical kind of tongue in cheek, but us egotistical photographers talk about how, we need to charge high prices for our beautiful artwork. No matter how much that conversation goes on and how much significance it may carry, there's still a massive segment of the market that simply can't afford $5,000 wedding photography. And somebody's got to offer that service at a lower price. When I got married, my parents paid $600 for my wedding photographer, and that was a lot of money for them. And
wow.
And that's the reality for a lot of people, right? So who's serving that market? I think it needs more than just, it needs to be more than just a stepping stone where photographers are coming into the market and they shoot there for a little bit and then move up. Somebody's got to serve that market consistently, proactively. And so I love that you have that brand position. But one of the things I wanted to get to is that it's one thing to say that you do that. It's another thing to also do it. We have to follow through on the brand position statement, and that's really important as well, and that will enable us to stand out above the competition. So I love that you're running that direction. And when you talk about kind of at a fair price, like what's a starting price point for your wedding photography services?
The starting price point for my services is about $1,800.
Nice.
And that's right around a 6 hours
Yes.
wedding photography, only one photographer.
Yep.
And you get a little small book with that.
Yep.
And, that's right around where I start at. Now, when you start to add in a second photographer and a bigger album, and you add the video in and all of those kind of things, you start to get more closer to the $3,000 range. And, and then if you want to move up where you want parent albums and things like that, you kind of get up into that $4,000 range.
Okay.
Somewhere around there.
Okay.
So I try to be fair and, try to offer an experience to my couples that, that something that would probably in DC or New York would cost $7,000 or $8,000.
Yep.
But, when you're dealing with a smaller area like where I am, and I'm close to Baltimore as well. I'm from Baltimore, actually. And, that market is, that base is right around the price point where you see people just offering 2 photographers and, 8 hours of photography. Mm-hmm. But, we're also throwing in some video as well for, an additional add-on.
Wow.
And customers like it.
Well,
because it's a one-stop shop.
Yeah. Okay. This is a really important conversation. I'm glad that you went in this direction because it's a good reminder for all of our listeners too to do a couple things. One, you pointed out to be aware of the marketplace and what they're charging in a particular marketplace. I think the other thing to do, and I've mentioned this before for our listeners, but for those of you listening in, go to theweddingreport.com and if you go to wedding, and it's actually wedding.report is what it corrects to, but we'll link to this in the show notes. For those of you who are either starting a new business or maybe in the process of wanting to refine your business and kind of retarget who you're actually going after as your ideal client, take a look at this information. It's pretty fascinating. Livingston, you mentioned $1,800, and that actually falls within the about $1,800 to $2,000 price point, which represents, at least according to the Wedding Report, about say between 70 and 80% of weddings shot in the U.S. And so there's this massive, massive segment of the market that, as I pointed out earlier, largely acts as kind of a stepping stone. It's either a place for part-time shooters or for photographers who are like, I want to shoot for $5,000 or $10,000 at some point, but I'm going to build up to that. And so they come in, they shoot at that price point, and then they move on. Meanwhile, the biggest segment of the market, potentially the most amount of money altogether, is in this segment, and yet it's not being proactively served. So I think it's great that you're there. I think there's a lot of opportunity for more photographers to go there, but you have to be aware of that opportunity. And so for those of you listening in, take advantage of these resources like the Wedding Report to make those decisions intelligently for your business. That's really cool. Well, talk to me then about your experience, and actually, especially in light of the segment of the market that you're serving at this price point. What would you say has been one of the most important principles in delivering a great customer experience? What have your customers responded really well to?
In my area, what I like to do is be myself.
Okay.
And I always like to be there for my customers and be honest and upfront with them if I can't deliver something. And when I say being upfront and honest, sometimes they may say, hey, do you offer something like a same day edit? And I don't offer that, or they may want something like, want their pictures back in 7 days. I don't offer that. So I try to be upfront with them about what I do offer, what I can do, and what I can't do. Mm-hmm. And if they want a certain style of, of photography, something that they're looking at maybe on a Pinterest mood board or something like that, and it's not my style of shooting, then I'm letting them know right up front that, that's not the way I shoot, and maybe they should get that person, but that's not the way I shoot, just so that I'm upfront with them, and also, I'm also being humble when I'm on site with my couples, because when they first reach out to us, we're so excited to talk to them and to try to get them to book with us. And then after they book, then, some people, they don't keep that engagement with them. Or if if the couple reaches out to them to ask them a question, they may take a day or two to get back to them. But before they book with you, you got back to them really quick. But now, since you already have them booked, now you want to, they're not that important. So I treat my customers, my couples rather, as if, they haven't even booked, and I want to answer every question that they have as soon as they ask it.
I love the proactivity in managing expectations. That's been a theme that's come up on the podcast, but I think it's so good that, and I wish I'd written, I think I did write this down. There was a quote that I heard on a podcast that was it really stuck out to me. And it's actually, I say a podcast, on our podcast, Nina Larsen Reed, who I interviewed a little while back, she said, people only get upset if they feel confused or lied to. And I'm not so worried about lying to somebody. That's not how I function. But the confused part was really interesting. Am I communicating? And this is true with my team at Photographers Edit and the Bokeh Podcast. It's true in my interactions with other photographers, with potential clients. Am I communicating with them in such a way that is easy to understand? Am I proactively managing expectations? Am I making assumptions in communication that are ultimately affecting our conversations negatively? Or am I assuming that they know something that really I actually haven't communicated clearly? There are all these things associated with good communication that I still have so much to work on in that regard. I'd love, and I have a lot of respect too, actually, Livingston, for the fact that you are putting so much emphasis on this idea. Did that come naturally for you? Did it come from your experience working with other companies? What was the motivation, I guess, for communicating more proactively, managing expectations in that way?
Well, it's kind of the same way. Like I run my home the same way. My wife, my children, all of that is kind of ran the same way. Expectations and just always having a process with something. So when it comes to being upfront and being honest, that's just something that I like to put that expectations of what I need out there up front.
Okay.
So yeah. And just being a humble person, man, I'm taught that, with the church that I attend and all of those things, man, you just got to be humble. You can't feel like, you're untouchable. You have to be that humble person that can lend a hand or even help someone, if they need help. And I'm sure all of us do that or talk about doing it, but, do we actually do it? Do we actually put the action in place? So you should always be willing to help someone. Maybe someone want a wedding, but they don't have all of the money, so you figure out a way to, make sure that you can still get this couple if your style is what they need, but they just don't have it. You try to help them out where you can. And sure. I know it's not everybody do that, but that's part of who I am, and that's part of being humble to me.
Wow, that's good. It's encouraging. It's inspiring, and I appreciate the example. And certainly, I can see the humility. I mean, in the conversations that we've had, and you were talking about just being yourself in the way that you interact with your clients. I guess really, and I'm fumbling for words here, but really just the general interaction and conversations, whether you and I have talked in person, we've talked, we were messaging even last night via instant messenger, like you just have this genuinely friendly vibe about you that it's not easy to be that way so consistently. But my experience with you, Livingston, that has been the case. And it's a good example for me. It's a good example for all of our listeners to just intentionally work at that. And you mentioned humility and the significance of communication as it relates to that too. I mean, I understand learning that in the church, having spent years and years in church myself. Was that something that your family instilled in you as well? Like, where does the value system for that I guess the importance of communication and of humility come from for you?
Well, my dad always taught, me and my brothers and sisters, he always taught me hard work, had us working at a young age. So, just to want to help anything with the family or just want to help anyone in public or, just to give back. That's one of the big things that I like to do is to give back and, make sure that, I'm not just the only one that has that's eating, everyone is eating, and that's just been the way that we've been raised, and my dad put a lot of that in me. My mom as well. I cannot forget her. She said a lot of prayers for me when I was young, as a knucklehead and thinking that everything. And,
sure.
She's instilled a lot of things in me as well. Sometimes just having a hands-off approach and then coming back and saying, see, I told you, so I learned a lot that way as well. But family values, man.
Oh, it's good stuff. Well, speaking of family, this is a great segue to my next question about time. We talk a lot about time here, and it's largely because of my experience in personal relationships, especially as they relate to work and how work can, in many times or many cases, interfere with those relationships. I'm curious how you're managing. We mentioned day trading, but then managing being a photography business owner, and then also having family, a personal life. Are there certain principles when it comes to time management for the sake of kind of balancing all of those things on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, well, Nathan, I use a lot of automation, man. Like we previously discussed, and my wife sometimes says that, look, we can't have a process around everything, but
that's true.
I beg to differ, I'm just like, nope, we need a process. Let's make a process. And sometimes it gets on her nerve. Yeah. But, I like to have a process around everything, man. Even my days, all right, I'm going to do this on Monday. I'm going to do this on Tuesday. Yep. I like to have all of those things written down and, time I'm going to spend with my family, because as a wedding photographer, most weekends you're out shooting, whether you're shooting your own weddings or you second shooting, helping another photographer or something like that, it's most of your weekends are gone. So you really have to find time to spend with your family. So that way, you don't have to worry about them saying, hey, we didn't spend this time together. We didn't spend that time together, So yeah. Yep.
It's super important. And it is, do you have kids?
I do.
How many kids do you have?
I do. 5.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So they're going to keep, what I was going to say is my kids used to, when they were quite a bit younger, in particular, there was, we used to do this thing called we just called it Fun Sunday. So basically it was actually Fun Monday before they started school. So Fun Monday was the day that all computers were shut down. Mm-hmm. And they knew that we were going to spend time with them. We're going to go out and do something. We're not going to work. And that was the expectation that was created, and they would hold us to that. It changed to Fun Sunday when they started going to school on Mondays, of course. But there's something about having the accountability and the kids being right there, being like, "Hey, Dad, let's go do something."
Right. Yep. Exactly, man. You got to spend that time with your children because you just never know what can happen when you can't spend that time. And then as they get older, it's just like, and then they're gone. Yep. So yeah, you definitely want to spend time with them and have those memories, with your family.
So speaking of time management, let's talk about delegation, because, and I'm really curious to get your take on this actually after your comment about systems, the significance of systems. We can't effectively run our businesses in a scalable manner, especially if we want to grow them, without at least experimenting with delegation. And interestingly enough, automation is kind of a way of delegation, if you will. We're delegating some of our processes to a software or softwares that help us automate our workflow, and that's super helpful. But then the next step, of course, is to delegate to an individual or to a company. Is this something that you've experimented with?
Absolutely, man. I've since 2019. 2 years ago, I've been sending my weddings to your team. And it's the process has been, the experience has been great. If I feel like something is not right, or it was done a little too much or or it wasn't done enough, I'll send it back. No problems, no issues. We'll take care of it. Sure. And, I've turned other photographers onto it, and, one of the things that I've learned, and I want to make sure I stay on topic. One of the things that I learned is, every once in a while, you feel like no one is going to do it like me. But if you don't ever give someone else a chance to try and do it, then you'll never know if someone else can do it like you or do it better.
Yeah.
And, that's the point I was when I was editing. I was just like, no, because they're not going to do it the way I want to. But, I send in a couple example photos and say, hey, guys, this is what I want.
Yeah.
And voila, I get it back. I don't have to worry about it because I can focus on other things like spending time with my family, trading, all of those things, getting out, riding my bike and all of that stuff. I don't have to worry about being glued to my computer to edit the photos because it's companies out there that do that, and when my buddy told me, he was telling me something about, I think you or something. And I said, oh yeah, man. I said, I listen to the podcast all the time. I said, I send all my stuff to them. Hey, what? I said, yep. So,
Well, I appreciate the kind words. And just to be very clear and upfront, not only with you, but everybody else, that question was totally not meant to be a setup so you could talk about PE. I wasn't even thinking about that. But the very, very kind words. And I do appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity to work with you. And you're right. Not only do we have to at least give others an opportunity to be able to prove themselves. I mean, this notion, in fact, I had my friend Thomas Flint on the podcast some time ago, and he talked about the ego at play there, where we get this idea in our head, and it's not just with editing, of course, anything that we want to delegate. It's super important that we keep an open mind to it, and this idea that nobody else is going to be as good as me. That the ego innate to that kind of a statement it's really unfortunate, right? And it gets in the way of potential growth personally and certainly professionally and as a business. And so we have to be open to the idea that somebody else can help us. And I think that's a really great reminder.
Yep. Yeah, man. I've and that's how I ran across the Bokeh Podcast as well. I was uploading some pictures or something like that. And as I was uploading them, I saw, a podcast. And I was just like, well, what is this about? And I saw the word Bokeh. And I said, well, it got to be about photography. I am on a photography website. Yeah. And I started checking it out, man. And I tell you what, I've learned so much, just listening to the past guests that you had on, man. And it's just been awesome just, to listen to the way that other people do things, man. It's just been awesome to hear other people, the way how they approach things, and man, I get my pen and paper out and I'll be writing some stuff down and I say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And, all of that stuff, man. So that's how I stumbled up on the Bokeh, podcast.
That's cool.
And, I never knew, who you were or anything like that until I stumbled upon the Bokeh Podcast. And I was like, man, I wouldn't mind getting on there and doing something, and then when we met at WPPI, my buddy was like, man, you should get on the Bokeh Podcast, man. He'll, cause he was already on.
Yeah.
So, and one thing led to another, man. And here we are. So.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I think was it Chip that connected the two of us?
No, it was Kenny Clapp.
Oh, Kenny, that's okay, man.
Yeah, it was Kenny Clapp. Yep. I know Chip too. He's a great guy. He's good at marketing. I know him too.
Yeah. Wow, that's funny, Kenny. Yeah, shout out to Kenny too, man. It's been a long time since I've had the chance to connect with him. No, it's really just to kind of go back to what you were saying though at Livingston about the outsourcing. I think it's an interesting thing both to give others an opportunity, but then also, and I want to get your take on this. You talked about sharing images with our team in order to communicate your editing style. I think, part of the things, it'd be very easy in the process of delegation to get frustrated with the process. And certainly I've been there as somebody who works with my team, whether, and it's funny, it's not just on a professional level. We want to communicate something to our kids. Hey, go do this thing. I need you to do this thing. If we don't actually communicate well enough to begin with, then that thing may not get done very well. That's on us at the end because we didn't communicate well. Communication is such an important part of this delegation process. And we have to take some responsibility for that rather than just writing the person off because it didn't turn out well the first time. We need to ask, hey, did I clearly understand what it is that I wanted? Because that can be a major problem in the process if we don't. But then did I communicate that in a way that is clear and that resonates with the person on the other side of the conversation so that they can actually carry out the job effectively? So I'm curious, from your experience and your perspective, what did you feel like helped in that process of communicating what it was that you wanted our team to do?
Well, I would edit the first, maybe 40 or 50 photos. And I would try to get 2 or 3 or 4 photos from each scene. So they knew exactly what I wanted.
Okay.
So instead of just maybe doing the first 10 of getting ready or, the first 10 of the ceremony or something like that, I would try to do, 3 or 4 images from each scene of the day.
Yeah.
And then I would send in, between 30 to 50 images and say, hey, here's what I'm looking for, and I would send them in as my examples.
Okay.
And then, I would, whatever editor is working on them would send them back. And I had one time they did it and, they had it, kind of in that, I guess that bright and airy look.
Yep.
I was just like, wait a minute, guys, that's not my style, you know? So,
Yep.
And I sent it back, man. And it was within like a day. They sent it right back with exactly what I wanted, with no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And, and that's that communication,
Yes.
man, that I look for, are you going to message me back and say, well, we did it this way because of so-and-so, or are you just going to just get right to it and so that way we can move on. And that's what happened.
Good.
So, yeah.
I'm so glad. I'm so good. And it's great to hear your experience. And to reiterate, this was not meant to be a big commercial for Photographers Edit, but then it's nice to hear your experience. and especially again, and this is something I've tried to talk a lot about here on the podcast in the last 4 to 6 months or so, the importance of communication. The person outsourcing or delegating whatever the work is, whether it's email management or editing or album design or accounting, whatever it is, has to be open to the fact that this is when you begin to delegate something, it is a process. And that process includes communication. If it's going to turn out positively in the end, it requires communication, open communication. And that's super important. So you have to be willing to do that. I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to do that, Livingston. I'm glad that it played out well in the end. And I think it's a great example, too, for all of our listeners when it comes to delegation, how to go about that process. I think that's really, really cool. But I want to transition to the next question. I think just knowing our conversation style, we could probably be here for like 2 or 3 hours. I want to respect your time. Talk to me about an impactful business or self-help book that you've read or listened to in the last few years that you would recommend to our listeners.
One of the books that I listened to was a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes, yeah.
Awesome book, man. I've learned so much from that book, and it made me really think about the way how I go about my day and just listening to my instincts and not always second guessing myself, So that was one of them. The Tipping Point was another good one that he wrote. Another book is Leaders Eat Last was a good one for leadership and things like that. And one for something that I've been, transitioning to and getting into is called the Burr strategy for real estate.
Okay.
That was another good one that I've listened to, and it was really, really straightforward and helped me a lot. So that's kind of some of the books that I listen to, besides one that I listened to back my dad gave me, man, which changed my life, was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yes. Man,
I tell you what, that book changed my life back then. It made me think about things completely different.
Yep.
So those are the books that that have inspired me a lot.
Oh, so that's good stuff. Okay, we're going to link to all these, and shout out to Haley who puts together our show notes at bokehpodcast.com. For those of you listening in, make sure you take advantage of those, and we'll list all these. We'll link to them on Amazon so you can easily go pick a copy up. And that's really good. Actually, we also have a list for those of you listening. If you go to bokehbookshelf.com, we've got a collection of the most popular titles that have been mentioned here on the podcast. And I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad may be in that list too. It's definitely a popular one. I read it a number of years ago as well. Super, super powerful. Good stuff. Well, we're going to put that information in the show notes, but let's go ahead and jump into kind of our primary topic, if you will, our main focus today, which has to do with protecting our clients' files. And this is something you actually alluded to me in our email conversation, Livingston. I think it was previous to our interview today, but you said that it's not a topic that we hear discussed a whole lot in our industry. Why do you think that is, and what ultimately made you particularly curious about it?
I think it's not discussed as much because I think that as photographers, I don't think that we think about that. The technology part of it, I don't think is thought about. I think we think about the the making it look great, making it look good, the style, making sure that it's out on social media and all of those things. I think we think about that a lot more than we think about protecting what we have and making sure that we have that backup structure so that way we're not losing anything. One of my rules is if you don't have the data, you don't have nothing to show, so you have to have that data. And I don't think that as photographers, we think about that. We don't think about those natural disasters that can come at any moment.
Yeah.
We think about just getting out shooting and coming home, so I that's the reason why I think that it's not talked about as much.
Well, it's not a super sexy topic either, right?
It's not. It's not
one of those things that people just sit around talking about just for the fun of it. So
yeah, like new cameras, that's an awesome topic to talk about. I can talk cameras all day, but when you're talking about backing up, it's like, no, it's not fun.
Right. Okay. Well, so I have to at least ask before we get into some of the technique behind your workflow. Have you ever had like a really nerve-wracking file loss or file management story that you can share?
I have not. I had a buddy who did. He was not shooting on two cards like I recommend.
Okay.
And he was shooting on one card, and he took a card out, put it in his camera, and it was already a wedding on it, and he shot over that wedding.
Oh no.
So yeah.
Oh man,
it got really, really bad. And yes. So
was he able to recover at least some of the files?
He was able to recover it. I think it had to be sent away, but he was able to recover it. But that's the importance of that type of stuff. And I did have one time I was changing something from one hard drive to another, and I mean it was so deep, when you're transferring all these files over, I made a mistake and deleted one. And, good thing I had it on a backup on my bigger 8 terabyte hard drive. And I just recovered it from that. But, that was like the biggest horror story that I had so far.
That stuff is so nerve-wracking. I think I maybe mentioned it in a previous episode, but I think the worst that I ran into with a digital card, and surprisingly so, because when I was shooting digital, I was actually a pro photographer shooting weddings when that transition from film to digital happened. And, the technology wasn't near what it is now. So it's a little bit surprising thinking back on it that I didn't have more issues. I think I lost some files on a card that had corrupted, but it was easy enough that I think we were able to just go use some software, extract, and we were able to get like 90 to 95% of the files at least back. And it ended up not being a huge issue. At one point I lost, when it was film, I think I lost one roll of film, but fortunately I was photographing with somebody else. So, we kind of had a backup in place, and never anything super stressful or not detrimental ultimately to the client really in any significant way. But I would just hate for any of our listeners to run into that type of a situation in the future. So, of course, we're going to proactively talk about how they can manage those files more effectively. Let's actually start with behaviors. Whether you've seen this or you've heard this through conversation, seen it in forums or in Facebook groups or whatever it might be. Any particular file management practices that you'd like to suggest photographers should avoid? Before we talk about what they should be doing, let's talk about what they shouldn't be doing.
What they shouldn't be doing is I would say one of the things that I always tell photographers just starting out is, if you're at a wedding and you're photographing someone's day, make sure that you're shooting the 2 cards, because you just never know what can happen. So I would say not to avoid shooting to 2 cards.
Okay. Now I'm curious about this one because I saw I'm trying to think if it was last year or the year before. Was it Nikon that came out with
Nikon.
One of their mainstream or their main pro cameras or semi-pro cameras, and it didn't have the second card slot. And again, having come from shooting digital or weddings on digital back in 2005, I guess, when we made the transition to the Nikon D1X, and 6 megapixels and terrible dynamic range, and certainly only one card slot at the time. This was just, and of course then previous to that with just one roll of film on my camera. The concept is a little bit lost on me if I'm honest. Is it, because for example, if I have one card and I'm shooting with it and it corrupts, even back then with the limited technology that we had, I was able to use software and get the files off the card. What are the chances? Is this just a matter of kind of minimizing any potential chance that anything could potentially go wrong? It's just the backup of the backup kind of thing?
Yeah, for me, it's a backup of what you're shooting. So you're shooting to both at the same time. Sure. So what's landing on card 1 is landing on card 2 as well. Right. So if card 1 get corrupt, then you still have card 2, or if you're leaving the wedding and something happened, you get into an accident or something, a wedding is probably something you wouldn't really be worrying about. You're worrying about not getting hurt in an accident, but let's just say your camera get thrown across the street or something like that, and you got both cards in it, then what do you do? But if you have one in your pocket and then keep one in your bag, then you may be okay. But so it's always good to have, a backup of everything. It's just good. It's the same way with our iPhones. Sure. Our iPhones are backed up to the iCloud, and we pay $30 a month almost to back that stuff up because you can lose your phone at any time. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? It's just always good to have a backup of something. Yeah. So, when you're shooting one card, you're shooting to both cards. Yeah. And, you just make sure that you always have that right then and there, so that way you don't have to worry about anything.
That's fair. No, I guess saying that it was lost on me is probably not an accurate phrase, because I get the concept. I think when I saw the photography industry kind of explode when that camera came out last year, I was like, yes. You guys are like, this is a little bit of overreaction, a little bit of first world problem thing going on here, because the reality that, or the possibility, I guess, that, that the one card corrupts and we can't do anything about it, it's not a super high likelihood. The flip side of that conversation is, to your point, Livingston, having a backup in place at all times, it's just the safer way to go. And I get it. I had to at least play devil's advocate a little bit. But I totally see where you're coming from and the point that you're making. At this point, are there any pro bodies? Are there any pro bodies that don't have dual card slots at this point?
I'm not sure. Besides, I think Nikon, the one that Nikon made was probably the last one. And I think they're coming out with a new one that has both slots. Yep. I think the one Canon came out with had one slot as well. And then I think they just came out with one of their newer cameras that does have the 2 card slots in them. I don't think any of them do not have those two slots. Okay. I think most of them have it. Okay. All right.
Well, let's talk about the file management workflow that you've got in place for the sake of backing up files. You told me that you subscribed to the 3-2-1 backup rule. Was this something that you learned elsewhere, or something that you came up with on your own?
Yeah, it's something I learned in the IT world. It was we had tape backup is what we used to use. Yeah. And, the tape, you would some people would take the tape out and just put another tape in and just leave the tape there, and some people may be too young and they don't know what tape backup is, and that's fine. But you would take the tape out and leave the tape in the office, but you don't have a copy offsite just in case something happens. Yeah. So one of the rules that is known across the IT industry is the 3-2-1 backup rule. Okay. And that's where I learned it at in the IT field.
Okay. So then coming from the IT field, did you implement this right away when you started your business?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
I sure did. Yep.
All right. So let's get into it then. Will you break that workflow down for us?
So the 3-2-1 rule is you want to have 3 copies of your data on 2 different formats, and you want to have 1 copy offsite.
Okay, I'm literally, you talked about pen and paper earlier. I'm literally doing the same thing. I'm taking notes here. So the silence is me taking notes. So 3 copies of the data in two formats.
Two different formats.
And one copy offsite. All right.
One copy offsite.
So let's take this one at a time and relate it to your workflow specifically. So 3 copies of your data. You already got 2 right off the bat with your dual card slots, right?
Yeah, but I really don't even. I mean, I count them as one.
Okay.
Really.
Okay.
But when if I'm shooting a wedding on Saturday and then I have another wedding on Sunday, and let's just say I need to use those cards, then I need to make sure that I have that process in place for the wedding that I did on Saturday.
Fair.
So I really don't count the cards as a backup. Okay. Now I know some people do, and they say, nope, I got those cards sitting at home, and they have multiple cards and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't really count that. My first copy is the copy that goes on my computer. That's pretty much my first copy. And then the 3 different copies that I have is on my server, which is a NAS, a network attached storage server, and that is running RAID. So it's about 4 to 6 drives inside that enclosure, and the data is striped across. Well, not striped. The data is on all of those disks.
Okay.
So if something happens to one of those disks, any of the other ones can, any of the other ones still have the data. So it sounds complicated, but I mean, it's all automated. Right. It goes back to those processes that I use, so, it's all automated.
And with that RAID server, this is so terrible. I can't remember the name of the brand that was so popular with the photography industry back in the day.
Synology.
Is it Synology? Okay.
I think so. Yep.
Is that the one that you're using, or you're using a different system?
No, I'm using the Synology. Yep.
Okay.
That's what I'm using.
Does it take a long time to get that whole thing set up, that process set up?
No, it's pretty straightforward. Now, for someone who's not in, like, my background is IT. So it was pretty straightforward for me, because I've used VMware and all of those, all of those programs back when I was in the IT world, but, so when I got the server, it was kind of like, oh yeah, I know what this is, and they got it so streamlined that, I mean, it's really, really easy. They made it so for someone who does not have an IT background, anyone can do it. So it was pretty easy to get set up, and they got a lot of, tools and help sections on there that'll help you as well. So it was pretty easy.
Okay, cool. So you've got that. So your 3 copies then, really, that's where they are. They're sitting on that RAID server across multiple disks.
So we got the one that's on the computer, and then we got the ones because the computer copies is the copies that I'm going to actually use to work on. I can work off of my server as well.
Right.
But with Lightroom, and we all know how Lightroom is sometimes.
Yeah.
I like to have that natively on what I'm working on. So I have that copy on the computer, and then I have the other copies on the server.
Got it. Okay. Got it. All right. Computer RAID server. All right. So that you got your 3 copies, and then the 2 formats. Are we talking like JPEG RAW, or what do you mean by 2 formats? So
the 2 formats is my 2 formats is my server is backed up to an external hard drive.
Oh wow.
So I know that sounds crazy, but my RAID system is backed up to an external hard drive that sits right next to my server. So that way, if I got in my RAID array that I'm running 4 drives in it, 4 terabyte hard drives in my setup that I have.
Okay.
So it's a total of 12 terabytes. 16 terabytes is what I'm running.
Wow.
And one of those drives is dedicated specifically for keeping a backup of the settings and everything else that's going in there. So I'm using probably around 12 terabytes. And that one drive is used for redundancy.
That is nuts. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and this is all automated. It's not something that I have to go in and do, but it's all automated. And then that server is backed up to an external hard drive that sits right next to it, just in case something happens. Let's just say something happens with the power of the the power cord or something like that. I still have that backup of that server right next to it. So I can use that if anything goes wrong. So that's my second format right there. My one is my RAID. My second one is my external hard drive.
Okay. All right. And then from that point, you're going to an offsite backup. Now, is this like a cloud-based backup, or are you taking
Yes.
Okay. I used like back in the day, and this shows how old school I guess that I was, or the time frame in which I was shooting. I had my offsite backups literally in a bank vault. So I had external backups on site, and then I would, I don't know, every month or two or so, I'd take backups and go put them in the bank vault, which is so funny to think about. But you're talking about cloud backups.
Now I am. I used to use the bank vault as well.
Okay. All right. So
I would take my hard drive. Yeah, I would take my hard drive and just take it to my bank, and I would do it once every 2 weeks or something like that.
Nice.
And just put it in there, leave it in there, and then bring it back, put some more stuff on it, and take it back. That's what I used to do. But now, again, back to those processes, it's all automated. I'm backing up to Backblaze. Is where I'm backing up everything to now.
Yep.
So, and that's my offsite copy. And I would think that they have redundancy as well, probably in different states or different countries, So, but yeah, that's my process, man. So my RAID server, my Synology server is backed up to an external hard drive. And then the RAID server is also backed up offsite to Backblaze. So that way, I don't have to worry about losing anything.
And by the way, for those of you who were curious, Synology, SYNOLOGY.com. We'll link to that in the show notes if you want to get more information about that particular brand and the solution that they offer. And the external hard drive, I mean, do you recommend any particular brand? Have you had success with any particular brands of external hard drives?
External hard drives, I've been using Western Digital is the ones I've been using.
Yeah, same actually. I had good success with those.
Yep. And I've even, believe it or not, Nathan, I've had them one or two fail on me, whereas though the sectors. And I don't mean to get real nerdy, but
go for it.
The sectors was just it just wouldn't. They were just unreadable.
Okay.
So I reached out to them, and man, they sent me another one within like I would say 7 to 10 business days. They had me another one out. I had to send them that one, of course, and they sent me a new one. Well, not new, a refurbished one. Same thing that I had with no problems because it was under warranty. So. Big shout out to Western Digital for that. But yeah, I've always had great success with them, and they own a lot of these companies now. I think they own like Seagate and a couple of other brands.
Interesting.
That
they bought.
Okay. So if you're buying one, you're buying them all.
And then you mentioned Backblaze. How did you land on that particular solution? And can you just sum up the workflow that you're using there with them?
Yeah, I was with Backblaze, you have to create something called buckets. Okay. Same thing that you have to create with Amazon Web Services. I don't think a lot of people think that Amazon is just a company that, they sell goods and sell the things that you need in your house. But most of their business and a big part of their business is cloud-based. Yeah. AWS. Yeah. And I was using that for a while. I was using AWS for a long time, even back in my IT days, just to, spin up some servers and test out some new software or something like that. Right. And it started to get really, really expensive, man. Interesting. And then Backblaze, I started to hear people talking about that a lot. And I just said, you know what, let me try this Backblaze out. So I just, kind of just did a workflow, just backing up a couple of files to them just to see how much it would cost, even though I did the calculations on their website of, if I'm backing up, 200 gigabytes of data or, 1 terabyte of data or 2 terabytes, how much is it? And it was pretty spot on, but it's almost like 3/4 less than what I was being charged at Amazon.
Wow.
And nothing against Amazon because they are awesome, you know, but it was just a fraction of the cost. So that's when I started to use Backblaze.
Okay. And is that something that you can just turn on, and is it mirroring your external drive, or how do you have it set up?
Well, what Backblaze does is Synology has software inside of it that you can link it to them, and then you can put in a time where you want this to start to back up.
Oh, cool.
My backup process is, I think it's 10 p.m. at night. I'm figuring I'm not doing anything, you know, you can have all of the bandwidth, you know, and I got, I actually upgraded my bandwidth to gig speed.
Yep.
Just so it can get there faster, you know, so because upload speeds are not the same as download speeds. So again, I don't mean to get too nerdy, but
it's nice to have that speed. It makes all the difference. We got gig service at my apartment, and unfortunately, I'm not getting a full gig throughput with my upload and download. But even having like the 300 or 400, even 500, I guess at times, up and download speed is pretty awesome, even when it comes to something as simple as a Zoom conversation, minimizing the chance of any technical issues, but certainly when it comes to backing up any information. This has been really good, Livingston. I especially appreciate, in fact, simple, actionable insight. You know, it's one thing to get like super complicated and in a 2-hour presentation. I love simple, actionable information, and this is super helpful, super practical, super simple, and certainly actionable. And I'm going to recommend for all of our listeners, if you don't have a system in place, here is one that's not going to even take you that long to implement. Go put something in place now. And this is certainly a great place to get started. I really appreciate your time, Livingston. Remind our listeners, if you don't mind, where they can find and follow your brand online.
On Facebook, my Facebook page, business page is Livingston Lee Photography. On Twitter, I don't really do a lot on Twitter with photography. That's more so like my trading stuff and trades I'm making and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of just, you know, my way of having fun. That is Livingston Lee, and it has an underscore. Livingston Lee underscore is for Twitter, and Instagram is Livingston Lee Photo. So that's how you can contact me, and also starting up a YouTube page about you know, some other stuff that I'm working on. So you can find me on YouTube at Livingston Lee. I'm going to start really getting some videos up on that and starting this my YouTube strategy.
Nice, man. All right, cool. Well, I'm curious to follow that too. We'll put all this in the show notes, bokehpodcast.com. Y'all make sure you take advantage of that resource. Huge. And thanks once again, Livingston. This has been tons of fun.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, photographers, for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@bokehpodcast.com. Make sure to visit our sponsors, photographersedit.com, custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and miilu.com, that's miilu.com, the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing.